Thanks for joining us on episode 1587 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Brian Tibbs, and I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, talent, and your treasure to live out your calling. Having the ability to change your relationships with money is key, and one way to be inspired to do this is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, with my friend Scott Mader. If I were to say I've got a briefcase stuffed with $2 million and I'm going to plant it on the other side of town, I live in Phoenix, a big town, and I'm going to give you a map, and there's going to be some sections that are empty, and there's going to be some wrong turns, but there's clues along the way, and you're going to have to make some adjustments, but you can find this briefcase full of $2 million. Would you accept my challenge? Oh yeah, sign me up.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's podcast episode, I interview Brian Tibbs. I asked Brian about how he helps people build wealth and become generous. Brian also shares how to focus on mindset first to build real wealth. And I also asked Brian to share with you how his time spent overseas as a missionary helped form his viewpoints on money. I have a great book that's been out for a while now called Inspired Living. Assemble the puzzle of your calling by mastering your time, your talent, and your treasures. You can find out more about that book over at inspiredlivingbook.com. It'll take you to a page where there's information and you can sign up to get some mailings about it as well as purchase a copy there. I'd love to see you get a copy and share with me how it impacted your world. Brian Tibbs is passionate about helping others build wealth and achieve financial freedom. At 19, he purchased his first duplex, and by 26, he had 10 units. However, feeling a desire to make a greater impact, Brian transitioned into the faith-based nonprofit sector, earning a modest income. Despite this, he and his wife successfully built a multi-million-dollar net worth using the principles that would later take the form of Tibbs' first book, The Hacker Method. Now, through the unexpected investor community, Brian is guiding others into successful, wealthy, and generous lives, proving that wealth can be built on any income. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hi, it's so good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So I shared a little bit in the intro about some of the work you've done and some of the journey that you've been on. And yet I always think of intros and that sort of thing as like the Instagram photos of our life. They never show the real whole picture.
Sure.
So talk a little bit for folks about your journey and what has brought you to the point where this is the work you're doing. This is the message that you're putting out in the world.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, even for me. And I've heard it a bunch and told it a bunch, but
you even lived it.
Yeah, I lived it. Grew up in a family where my dad was a small business owner and his dad was a small business owner. So we weren't strangers to the business world per se. Money was discussed at the dinner table. I know I've met a lot of people where money was like a really bad thing. Like it was always scarce and it caused fights with the parents and the kids didn't get what they wanted. That wasn't the case with us. It's not that we always had massive abundance or anything like that, but we discussed it a lot. And so I had understood the concept of money growing up. And in college, I decided to study business, and there's a fun story too about me learning the power of real estate. And so I decided after I moved out of my dorm that I didn't want to pay rent. I didn't want to pay a mortgage all by myself. So I bought my first rental property. It was a duplex, rented out one side, lived in the other. And my goal was to build a portfolio. And I started to do that. But at age 28, I decided there's got to be more to life. And I felt a calling to give up everything and go serve overseas as a missionary. So my new wife and I, we just had gotten married. We'd been married for a year, and we packed up 4 suitcases and jumped on an airplane and moved to Guatemala, sight unseen. And we looked at each other and we said, are we crazy? And we said, we could do anything for a year. That was our commitment, 1 year volunteer service. And so we did that. I ended up turning into 16 years. I started my own nonprofit, co-founded it, and was the CEO of the nonprofit for 16 years. And we did church planting throughout South America, planted 96 churches. But all the while, I still had the background and I kind of had the desire to build my real estate portfolio. So just like with a little bit of one eye focused on that, we did continue to build our portfolio. And at the age of 44, we had decided for lots of reasons that our work overseas was done and our portfolio was producing enough to pay the family's expenses and continue to expand. So we moved back to the United States, settled in Phoenix, Arizona. That was in 2021. And now I'm here. So that gets us up to speed.
So a couple of questions. When you said you decided to study business, why was business where you decided to go? Was it a no-brainer, or was that something you had to really think about?
Yeah, good question. When you're a little kid, everybody asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my answer was always, I want to work with my hands. I want to do something crafty with my hands. And I still do that as a hobby, but everybody frowned a little bit like, what? That doesn't make any sense, because we know your personality and we know your family history. And when I was 17, I remember I was in the car with my dad and I just brought it up. I said, hey, Dad, I think I'm going to major in business. And he goes, yeah, everybody knows that. It was just assumed. And to me, that was news to me. I was like, oh, I'd never said anything out loud, but it's just always been my inclination. And like I said, growing up in a family of small business owners, if you grow up in a family of plumbers, the chance of you being a plumber is pretty high. And so I think that I was just carrying on the family business, so to speak, and had the inclination for it.
Mm. And then conversely, you said you felt the call to the mission field and took that quite a bit of a leap from business and work and all of those things into the mission field. Tell us more about that. How did you know that was a call to do that? How did you experience it? How did that show up?
Yeah, good question. I had a restlessness, I guess would be the right word. Really, from the age of maybe 24, 25, I was in business. I was working with my dad in his business. I was building my real estate portfolio. I had a couple of other small kind of side businesses that I was running. But I just had a restlessness. Like, I don't want to just spend my entire life accumulating stacks of green paper, was kind of the way I like to say it. I wanted there to be more meaning. And it just came to a head. It came to a point to where I couldn't keep pushing it out. And, I knew I was young, but I was on this path, and the path was going in one direction. And if I didn't correct it, pretty soon I'm going to have kids and mortgages and all this stuff that's going to weigh me down. And if I'm going to do something, I need to do it now. And so I did finally come to just the conviction that, I want to serve. I want to do something bigger than myself. And so I surrendered to that. And I felt like God opened opportunities for me to go and serve. And if there was a door that was closed, we just pushed it open a few times. And ended up spending 16 years. A very rewarding time. Now's a rewarding time too, in a different way. But just getting up every day, knowing exactly what your purpose is and knowing it's for the benefit of others, it was very fulfilling.
That kind of brings me to the question of your faith journey. One of the things that I like to highlight on the show is that sort of intersection between our life journey and our faith journey. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a clear juxtaposition. You were talking about doing business and making the stacks of dollars and that kind of feeling, and then wanting to serve others. And yet now you're, quote, back in business. So does that mean the faith has gone away and all of that? How has that played out for you?
That's an excellent question. I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he asked me that. He's a very wealthy, successful guy. And he asked me, so how do you square being wealthy and focusing on building wealth and being driven by your faith as well? And I was like, well, it's funny you should ask. I was going to ask you the same question. It's a tricky question to answer, I point to, and I talk about this quality of wealth as the last section of my book, that Matthew chapter 25 is the parable of the talents. And Jesus is telling the story, and he talks about this master that has these 3 servants, and he gives them all bags of gold. They're called talents, which when I read the word talent, I think, oh, like they can juggle, or it's not. Yep. It's literally bags of gold.
It's a very large amount of gold. It would actually be more than it would be comparable to a couple of years' income. It's like somebody has handed you more money than you're going to see in the next couple of years.
Exactly. Like it's the top guy got measured in millions of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. So then the master says, okay, go multiply this. I'm leaving. I'll come back. When he comes back, he asks for an accounting of what happened. And you know the story, and I know the story, but the amazing thing is the 2 people that doubled the money, the master said, enter into the joy of the master. And to the one that just dug a hole, didn't lose the money, which is interesting, he just hid it, and he was too afraid to invest it. He said, out of here, you wicked servant, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So these 2 opposite destinations for these people, the people who are willing to take a risk and multiply gold. We can't. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people, oh no, this is the spirit, or it's friendships. No, it's gold. We're instructed to take the resources that we have and multiply it. And he's speaking to people who are filled with faith. And so I think that's a good lesson for us. Now, there's other lessons too. Chasing after wealth is like chasing after the wind from Ecclesiastes, right? And so I think it's really great for us human beings to have those conflicts of, okay, I'm supposed to multiply my resources. I'm also not supposed to love money for the sake of money. I'm supposed to elevate relationships above everything else, including money, and all that stuff is itself, and it's perfecting us as individuals. So I think our job is to, yes, multiply our resources, and yes, elevate relationships above anything else, and yes, not just dedicate your life to building wealth.
Yeah, I think that tension that we feel sometimes in terms of money and our approach is important. For you in your life, how has that tension shown up? How has it played out? Did you feel like when you were on the mission field, it's okay, now I'm earning my time so that later I don't have to? How did that actually play out in the way you felt at the time?
Yeah, as I've matured, I think I've come to the conclusion, when I was younger in my 20s, I had this A or B mindset. If I'm in business, I'm in business, and that's not really serving. If I'm in missions, that's serving. And honestly, I there's only so many people that could be pastors and missionaries, and whatever else might be considered service. And then the other 99% of us are in the world, and that's where we need to be. And I've come kind of full circle to this point to where maybe it was a little bit naive to think that the only way for me to really give back and serve and be faithful would be to do something full-time in ministry. I'm not regretting anything that I did, and I have amazing memories from that time and amazing relationships that we've built from that time. But for our third investment fund, and it's focused on buying real estate that's going to become sober living houses. And that does the same for my soul. It's an investment, and we're going to make profit from it, and we're going to be a refuge for people who are trying to make a significant change, positive change in their life. And that does the same thing for my soul as anything that I did in the church planning work. And it's that marriage of business and service that I think is the most important thing for us to really seek out.
That brings me to an obvious question as well, which is that time you spent overseas as a missionary doing that kind of work. How do you think that has prepared you or changed you, or what lessons did you take away from that you now think have helped you in the part of the life now where you're not doing that, so to speak, and you're back in the business world?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's way too many ways to list them all. But I think the big ones we learned Spanish and Portuguese, so we're trilingual, our family. And that helps in a lot of ways. One, I can see the world from a Hispanic mindset. So I I can understand different kind of politics and different stuff in a way that people who aren't exposed to that wouldn't maybe necessarily think in that way. Plus, I live in Arizona, and so I use Spanish daily. And I think that really helps me in the world of real estate. It helps me break down barriers with construction contractors, landscapers, vendors, all sorts of people who are first language Spanish or maybe only language Spanish in ways that other folks can't. So there's an advantage there. I would say the biggest thing, however, is John Maxwell was an author that I read in college, and one of his ideas that he planted that I latched onto is he said, if you want to see a real good leader, go look for an effective pastor. Mm-hmm. And his concept is the pastor has to recruit, and he's working with largely volunteers. He's not paying the salaries of the lay people that serve in the church. And so if you see a pastor, and I just translate that to mission work as well, because we dealt with volunteers all the time, that is effective with recruiting volunteers, and they stick around and they do the work and they do a good job and they have the passion, then you're going to see the mark of a true leader. And I think that has really influenced my leadership and my management style. We had over 100 people on staff at the peak in the nonprofit, lots of moving parts, building churches all over the place, planting churches all over the place, short-term volunteers coming down. So it was very dynamic. And now coming back into business, I for sure use the skills that I learned to motivate volunteers. I use that now, even if I have people that are on payroll. So now maybe you ask my staff, they wouldn't agree, but it has absolutely affected the way that I lead. And rather than holding a big stick, I probably use carrots more than sticks in trying to motivate staff, because I always go back to the PTSD of trying to get a volunteer to do something.
And John, of course, was a minister, a pastor of a very successful church before he pivoted and went into the leadership development world as well. But I think, too, I think it's even more than just working for volunteer or working with volunteers. It's also a pastor is there to create vision and to sell ideas and to communicate. And there's a ton of skills that they involve. And it sounds like you were developing those skills in the mission field as well. I think for me, a lot of my leadership philosophy came out of the time I was a school teacher, and so similar idea. I've got 150 people that are sitting there and they don't really want to be there. It's like, how do I get them engaged and active and working the way that they need to be? So I think it is interesting. So that's part, I guess the reason I wanted to say that is I think it sounds like it's not even necessarily just, quote, the mission field or the overseas. It's the fact that you took lessons from it. You made a deliberate effort to take lessons from that and go, hey, I can apply these in other ways.
Absolutely. And that actually kind of sparks another thought too. Going backwards, I brought business concepts or administrative concepts from the business world or from a profit mindset into the nonprofit world. And I was exposed to people who had spent their entire lives. They went to high school, then they went to seminary, and then they went to ministry and never were exposed to those kinds of things. And I remember one time I had a Venezuelan guy that was talking to another one of my leaders who later came back and told me the conversation. He said, Brian, he expects results. And it was eye-opening to me. I didn't feel like I was being overly challenging on all these kinds of things, but I think just in that world, that's not typical, where let's chart a path, let's set a vision, and let's accomplish something big. And so I think I brought that into the mission field as well. That got refined, maybe down to being a little bit less piles of green paper, kind of a focus, and now coming back full circle, perhaps.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, because it sounds like in the business field now, back to that both thoughts at the same time. It's not about having money, but it's also not about having money.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It's the why behind it rather than just the result. Yeah.
Yes, very well said.
How do you think that why shows up for you now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, that was when we decided to come back. There was a difficult period of a year or two. of realigning or reaccepting an identity. And that was a tough period. When you're overseas and you're the gringo and you're bringing the resources and the leadership, there's a lot of folks that are patting your ego a little bit. And then when you come back here and you look like everybody else and you talk like everybody else and you're not special anymore. And so it does take some adjustment. But back to what I was saying before is you don't have to be a minister to minister, and you don't have to be a Scrooge to be a businessman. And so I think that having lived kind of both of those worlds, I'm hoping that I'm walking each and every day purpose-filled. I mentioned earlier the Sober Living Fund. That really, for me, it feels just like what we did in ministry. Still focused on profit. In fact, I always used to tell people in the nonprofit world, the only difference between a for-profit organization and a nonprofit organization is nonprofits don't distribute their profits to shareholders. Mm-hmm. Because a nonprofit that doesn't have profit is out of business. Mm-hmm. And so we still focused on having surpluses. And that was a foreign concept to a lot of folks. No, that's evil. And I'm like, well, if you want to continue the cause. So in that sense, it's really similar. So long as I feel like that I am seeking out things to be purpose well beyond just the accumulation of wealth, then I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. I used to work for Educational Testing Service, which is a nonprofit, and it's one of the biggest educational testing companies in the world. It makes many millions of dollars every year. Yeah. And people are like, but it's a nonprofit. That's not what nonprofit means. Yeah. Nonprofit does not mean doesn't make money. Yes. It's how it doesn't use that money. That's what, and ETS puts it back into research and development and other things like that. So it's not being distributed to shareholders.
Exactly. It's not making other people wealthy. It can be wealthy, but it's not making other people wealthy.
It's using that wealth to do whatever mission it has been set up to do.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So let's expand that out to somebody who's listening today. A lot of the folks listening are entrepreneurial minded. They get that idea of starting a business or starting a portfolio or investing or growing their wealth. But at the same time, in the moment that they're living today, maybe they're stuck a little bit. They're in that, whether it's living paycheck to paycheck, whether it's just doesn't feel like there's ever enough. Somebody told me the other day, we got 2 toddlers at home. I don't care how much I make. It's not enough. And I get that. I understand that feeling. Talk to them for a minute. What are some of the ways, the reframes or the mindsets, or how do you take that approach for folks that are at the beginning part of that journey, but they kind of want to go down that road?
Yeah. And that I mentioned my book earlier. It's called The Hacker Method. The Hacker Method is how so while we were in the nonprofit, the first couple of years, I treated it like a business. I didn't take any pay. And then once it got established, then we slowly started to take a very meager salary. And then towards the end, it was a healthy salary. But if you took all of our paychecks from the nonprofit divided by the hours that we spent in the work, we made $9.20 an hour. We being me and my wife made $9.20 an hour, which is less than minimum wage in Arizona where I live now. And in spite of that, we still were able to build a multi-million-dollar net worth that is now generating enough cash to where I don't have to work again. I choose to work. And that was because we decided to not say things. I'm not disagreeing with the toddler. Understand that the demands of a family are intense. But rather than just accepting that nothing I can do, we decided to refuse to live the consumer life, and we were going to live an investor's life. And so even while we were making very little income, we took a significant portion of that tiny amount of money, and but through discipline, we invested it every single month. So investing over long periods of time is how you build wealth, and you can't take a decade off if you decide to go save the world, right? You have to keep plugging away at it. Now, how do we refuse to do the consumer? In my book, I have the first section is Hack Your Lifestyle, and it's 6 different ways that you can get out of the majority of your expenses that are expected of Americans. And the number one of those is house hacking. refuse to pay a mortgage or a rent payment ever again. And I can already hear everybody saying, it's ridiculous. I want to tell you a story. I bought a house in the height of COVID. Everybody was afraid the world was over. And I found a deal. It was a house with a cottage on the same properties on a corner lot. So you didn't even know they were on the same property because their front doors went out to different streets. We moved into the house, kind of shelter in place, trying to live out the pandemic. And we cut the cottage into 2 units and we rented it out as a short-term rental. The income that comes from those 2 units pays for all the expenses, the mortgage, taxes, insurance, repairs, water, power, sewer, garbage, pays all the expenses for the entire property if we're living in the front house. That's a house hack. It's 2,400 square feet. It was built in 1938, beautifully remodeled. It's in the best neighborhood in Boise. And so we were able to do that. Anybody who changes their mindset from that of a consumer, I deserve a 2,500 square foot house. I'm going to have the biggest mortgage I can possibly afford. I don't want anybody to walk on my property. I'm going to park my car in the. If you can change that mindset to where I'm going to figure out a way to cut 30% of my income that goes to housing, cut that out, have somebody else pay my mortgage. That is how you can begin to chip away at the consumer, how your paycheck gets consumed by all this stuff that we think that we have to have in order to be happy or comfortable or those kinds of things. So that's the key thing that I talk about with people who are trapped in that paycheck to paycheck thing is just, instead of looking at your paycheck and grumbling and saying, okay, paycheck, what are you going to allow me to do this month? Flip that around, look at your paycheck and say, okay, paycheck, this is what you're going to do this month. 40% of you is going to be invested for the future. 50% is going to be spent on my living expenses, and 10% is going to be given away to make the world a better place. That's my formula for breaking out of the paycheck to paycheck trap. And it's absolutely possible for anybody who puts their mind to, I am no longer going to live this consumer lifestyle. I'm going to beat the game.
And I think that idea of focusing on the mindset is important too.
Yes.
And again, not necessarily everyone's going to take the same exact route. And that's not what you're saying. I just want to call that out for folks. Because immediately I heard someone going, yeah, but I can't find a property that has a cottage to rent. It's that's not the point you're making.
Yeah.
The point is step back and go, wait, I got to look at this a different way. I'm not just going to accept the status quo. Maybe it's somewhere else that you give up, or it's another way that you hack the situation. But sometimes it's as simple as buying a house that's actually smaller than the house that you could, than the mortgage company tells you can afford, because they'll tell you can afford a lot more than you really can. I'll tell you that right now.
They're going to max you out, and they're going to make you lose sleep at night because they get paid. The more you spend and the more you strap onto your financial back, the more they make. Know that going into every cars, credit cards, houses, anything that you're going to buy.
How do they get paid is a really good question to ask.
Exactly.
I'll tell you a quick story because you'll appreciate it. So I had a client many years ago that I used to call Kid and Barbie, and just lovingly, because I don't want to refer to them by their real names because somebody out there may know them, but they lived in the nicest house on the block. They had brand new Lexus, brand new Mercedes in the driveway, both very good income, very high paying jobs, all of the trappings of success that people would see. And they never entertained in their house. And it was always weird. And what I discovered as I started working with them is that's because they had no furniture.
Wow.
They had 2 lawn chairs in the living room.
Wow.
With the TV on an old piece of, like, a couple of cinder blocks, like the college student would live. They had an air mattress that they slept on. Wow. And so they had all of these from the outside appearance. And it was because they were overstrapped to do it. And as we worked through, they started making different decisions, and they did change some behaviors and change everything else. And now they live in a very nice house and entertained and are doing quite well. But
that's awesome.
It was the mind shift of they were living for one goal and then realized, wait a minute, that's not really the goal that we want. We want to do this in a different way. Yeah. And change our family tree, not just have a nice car in the driveway. Because I would say cars is the second. Houses are the biggest, and cars are probably the second biggest that people get bitten by.
Yeah. whenever people say, so I always prescribe 50% for spending, 40% for investing, and 10% of your paycheck to make the world a better place. And I always get the kickback. How in the world am I going to get 40% of my paycheck to invest? The 3 areas, you could do it in 3 hacks. The house hack I talked about, the logic, I have a formula, LOGIC, each letter is a different word, logic, vehicle ownership, and then credit card hacks. So those 3 things, usually for most Americans, comprises 40% of their paycheck. So if you can hack those 3 things, you take that 40% and you invest it year after year of returns, and you'll become a multimillionaire. It's just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other piece that I wanted to bring out. You mentioned investing over time.
Yeah.
What's the best way to get rich quick?
If as long as quick as a decade, you're set, right? The people selling you the get rich quick idea, the only people getting rich is the guy selling you the idea. There are some exceptions, of course, like somebody who figured out Bitcoin way early, or somebody who won the lottery, the 1 out of 300 million tickets sold won the lottery. Okay, yeah, he got rich quick, but that's not a formula that everybody can replicate. It's not a formula I can replicate, and I feel like I'm pretty good at this. The get rich quick is like getting a 6-pack quick. I'm sorry. It's going to take some time and devotion and dedication, and that's just the laws of building wealth unless you come into some anomaly that most of us don't have access to.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
I want to give it a little analogy. So if I were to say I've got a briefcase stuffed with $2 million and I'm going to plant it on the other side of town. I live in Phoenix, big town, very big town. And I'm going to give you a map, and there's going to be some sections that are empty, and there's going to be some wrong turns, but there's clues along the way, and you're going to have to make some adjustments, but you can find this briefcase full of $2 million. Would you accept my challenge? Oh, yeah. Sign me up. Okay. Now, what if instead of that briefcase is across town, it's across a decade? Are you still willing to take the challenge? Because anybody and everybody listening to this right now, if they're willing to dedicate that amount of time, it's a roadmap. There's some chunks missing, tours. There's some mistakes that you're going to backpedal, lose a little bit of money. But if you follow the course, you can get there. You can become a multimillionaire. It's just going to take some time.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important mindset again. Is the other thing I would say is for some people, statistically, right, they look at lottery winners.
Yeah.
Something like 60% go bankrupt after winning the lottery. You look at other kinds of things where people come into sudden wealth, maybe an athlete with a huge signing bonus, and then they get injured and now they're bankrupt. And it's how are you bankrupt? Somebody handed you $40 million. What happened?
Yeah.
And an inheritance is another one that I've seen squandered away. And a lot of times it's because they haven't built up the mindsets and the disciplines and the habits. And so they just continued behaving the same way, but they have more zeros.
It's the same as with kids. If you just give them cash every time they ask for cash, they're going to treat that cash as if it's unlimited, it's flowing, and I don't have to do anything. But if they earn it through doing chores, they look at that dollar like, I don't know if I want to spend this. This was hard to achieve. And so that same thing happens to us as adults. If it takes a little bit of effort and focus and concentration, maybe we're a little more careful with it than if it just falls in our laps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I've got a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests, but before I ask you those, is there anything else about your work or your book, The Hacker Method, that you would like to share with the listener?
Yeah, I wrote the book for the person that is maybe losing sleep at night and worried about how am I going to make all my credit card payments? How am I going to make my car payment? How am I going to make my house payment? How am I going to keep my wife happy? How am I going to take care of my kids, the 2 toddlers, that guy? I wrote the book for that guy. I was put into a situation of very limited income, but still, and part of the issue is I knew that the church wasn't going to provide us with any retirement. And so I was just really taking the retirement responsibility on my own shoulders seriously. And it just worked out even better than I had, I guess, imagined, because we were just so disciplined. And so I wrote the book partially because when I started telling my ministry partners that we were leaving, they would ask me, what are you going to do next? I was like, nothing. And that was hard to explain. And I had one guy really drilling into me, and he goes, "Do you think you could show me how you did this? Because I am in the same boat. I don't have a retirement on the other end, and I want to do the same thing." And I was like, "I don't really know how to tell you because I've never said it out loud. We just did it." And so that forced me to sit down. I was trying to help this guy. I was going to write him like a 2-page white paper or something, and it turned into a 200-page book. So I decided, okay, if this guy needs that help, maybe there's other guys out there. And I've met so many people that are in that paycheck to paycheck trap, losing sleep, worried about their family. That's another way for me to serve as well. And I get no better satisfaction than helping somebody climb out of that paycheck to paycheck trap.
Absolutely. So my brand is Inspired Stewardship, and I run things through that lens of stewardship. And yet over the years, I've also discovered that's one of those words that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
So when you hear the word stewardship, what does that word mean to you?
Well, interesting. And this is where my Spanish kicks in. The translation is mayordomo, which is basically butler.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about, I'm supposed to be a butler. What does a butler do? A butler does everything that the homeowner, the house owner, the master asks for. It's a servant role. Wow, interesting. So if I am entrusted, if you can take that mindset of whatever income you have, whatever wealth you have been entrusted with that wealth, and you're just the butler. You're just the guy that is supposed to take care of it and anticipate the needs of the master and serve at the master's request and make sure that the stuff that master owns is better off than when you found it. So that's what I see as stewardship, is it's really servanthood with resources that have been given to you that don't belong to you. So that's what I think of as stewardship.
So this is my favorite question that I like to ask everybody. Imagine for a minute that I could invent this magic machine. And with this machine, I was able to take you from where you are today and transport you into the future, maybe 150, maybe 250 years. And through the power of this machine, you were able to look back and see your entire life, see all of the connections, see all of the ripples, see all of the impacts you've left. What impact do you hope you've left in the world?
I hope that I have inspired people to do something that they never thought was possible. If at my funeral, if somebody will utter that, I will consider my service to others to have been a success. That without his influence, I wouldn't have been able to realize this thing in me, or I wouldn't have been able to stretch further. I wouldn't have been able to turn off Netflix and go try something hard. That to me is what I want my life to be.
So what's coming next? What's on the roadmap as you continue on your journey?
Yeah. So when we came back in 2021, I didn't really have a lot to do. I was writing the book. And so I looked around and I thought, maybe I should grow my portfolio. So I gave myself 2 years to double my portfolio, real estate. And we did that in about 18 months. And so then when we got that done, I was like, okay, maybe now I should triple it. So now I'm about halfway through my process of tripling my doubled portfolio. And I've already set the next goal for the 10-year trajectory to once I get to the triple, then I'm going to quadruple that. And so I want to build out an extensive network of real estate portfolio throughout the United States. And there's sober living. I do short-term rentals. We do some other stuff as well. And just scratch that itch and build a team. I want to have a team of people that are just high-powered professionals that I would love to work with. So I'm slowly building that team up to have fun through this process and just be able to take my family anywhere in the country you want to go. We got a house there. We'll go stay and we'll go experience the area. And so that's what we're working on.
Awesome. So you can find out more about Brian Tibbs and his book over at theunexpectedinvestor.com. Of course, I'll have a link to that over in the show notes as well. Brian, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listener?
Yeah. So after we wrote the book and published it, we decided to start a community. And so for $97 a month, anybody can join. It's that guy that's can't sleep at night, that is worried about paying his mortgage and his car payments and his credit card bills and taking care of the family and making steps forward rather than climbing the sandhill of just, we got a raise. I've already spent the raise and there's no money left. So just really coaching with those folks. So in the community, we do group coaching, we do one-on-one coaching, there's tools, there's small group accountability. So it's really designed around how to help people climb out of that paycheck to paycheck trap. So that's at theunexpectedinvestor.com as well, if you're interested.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor. Go over to inspiredstewardship.com/iTunes rate, all one word, iTunes rate. It'll take you through how to leave a rating and review and how to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get every episode as it comes out in your feed. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.